But I want to start a little bit with the All-Star game because this was the big news that broke right as we were heading up to our get together. So we weren't able to share our thoughts on it in the moment, but just a couple of notes here, right? Because in America, the All-Star game is commonplace. It is a natural stopping point in the middle of the season. Teams get a break, and the best players in the league, they come together, they showcase their talents in these little skill games and an exhibition game, and it's all a good bit of fun. And MLS is no different, right? They highlight their best players. They want them to play in this game to show, look at the talent that we have in the league against other clubs, this time in Liga MX's All-Stars. And they have a rule where if you get voted in, you have to play, or you will get a 1 game suspension. It's very out of the norm for the global soccer fan and the global soccer player. However, every player knows, or they should know, that this clause exists in the contract that they signed. However, this year, a few Inter Miami stars chose, and actually they were told by their club that they were not going to participate in this game. Lionel Messi and Jordi Alba both sat it out on the sidelines, and for their troubles, they earned a 1 game suspension. While this sparked outrage in the community by Messi lovers around the globe, we figured it's time to give our 2 cents. And by we, I mean me, because Connor's not here. So, starting with Messi missing the All Star game and what it means, right? This is a bad look for the league. I think there are two sides to this, as there always usually are, right? Because, first off, there's always the type of the debate where what type of DP are you going to bring in, right? The ever-present concern is that you're going to get somebody, and I'll use Shaqiri as the example in Chicago, that is going to think that they're bigger than the league. They're going to walk around and create a paycheck. They're going to skip out on all the things they don't want to do, and they're going to cast a terrible light on the league that the Euro snobs and the MLS or anti-MLS crowd are just going to eat up and use for days and days and days in terms of content. And Messi skipping this game treads into that territory a bit, right? This league signed you, and as you know, you knew this coming in to be I'll use the term ambassador to the game, right? They were heavily reliant on elevating the league presence off of your massive stature, Lionel Messi's that is. And for him to not play in this game kind of looks like a big red flag on the surface, right? He goes about it saying, "Oh, I don't want to play because it doesn't matter to me, and it's all about me because I'm Lionel Messi. It's not about the league." And we're not going to cover whether the All-Star game should or shouldn't be a thing. That's not really for here or there right now. That might be something we get into later, but it won't be in this specific episode. So, save your comments, please. But it came out later that Jorge Mas admitted that they were told not to participate. The club owners told them not to play in this game. You're not going to go. And this takes it a step further for me, and this is where my worries come in because now you have owners who have had every exception made for them to have this team that they have at the moment, right? The Rodrigo de Paul, the Messi, Suarez, Alba, Busquets, right? These bringing in Messi in and of itself, finding a clever way to get that done. Everything was done to make sure that this team can get put together. Now this owner is outwardly telling his players to break the rules that are in their contract because either one, they think they can get away with it because they're bigger than everybody else, or two, they don't care about the rules and they think that they should be able to do whatever they want. Now, this is particularly concerning to me, especially from a team that has already been broken down and been punished for breaking roster rules just a few years back, right? Their first year in the league. This team is now compiling what many see as a super team and are already being labeled with this, oh, they don't have to follow the rules level and stuff like this. And I don't think that they're out there breaking rules, but now you have this guy coming out here and saying, no, we're intentionally telling people not to do the things that they're contractually obligated to do. It emphasizes this point of they don't follow the rules that could lead to a bigger problem, right? So if you think about it, if you're in a league where spending rules are so important, right? You have owners that signed on to these rules and said, yeah, we're gonna abide by these rules. We're gonna follow along, and we're gonna spend within limits outside of a certain set number of players, and that's gonna be it. So we're all invested in the same pot. Now you've got these owners who are outwardly defying the rules. I'm not gonna follow them because I think they're stupid. Well, if one person can do that, why can't another billionaire do that, right? Why can't Arthur Blank go out and spend on 7 DPs because he just doesn't think that the 3 DPs are a good rule anymore? Or why doesn't maybe one of the LA teams, right? Ricky Puig got hurt. Oh well, we're full on DP slots, but all 3 of my DPs got hurt, so I'm gonna go sign 2 more. What are you gonna do? You're gonna find me? You can't stop me, is kind of the vibe that this is coming out as. If you can't control them based off of a set rules that everybody agrees on, you're setting yourself up for a really big spiral out of a control in a league like MLS where spending keeps all owners interested and happy and prevents infighting and all this sort of other stuff. But what it's setting itself up to be on the surface is that there are owners who are basically saying, if I don't agree with your rules, I'm going to do what I want anyway. And that to me is super concerning because that is how you then spiral out into everybody just go spend whatever you want and see what happens. And we saw what happened when the NASL did that. It's definitely more concerning from that point of view than any other point of view for me right now in terms of this All-Star game fiasco. That being said, when Messi and Alba decided that they weren't going to show up, like we mentioned, they were suspended, and they were suspended for a crucial FCC matchup. And was this the right decision? I said this on Twitter, and I'll say it here as well. Two things can be true. First, I believe it was absolutely the right decision. We saw it happen to Zlatan. We saw it happen to a bunch of other stars who chose not to do this. The club told them to break the rules, and they got punished for it. I don't have an issue with that. They knew what they were doing when they got into it. They chose to make this decision, and they are paying for their decision. No problem with that at all. And that is regardless of whether you think the All-Star game should exist or not, or if it's a stupid game, it's an exhibition, it doesn't matter. It's so American, it doesn't need to be there. Blah 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 blah. Don't care. And likewise, if you say, oh, if they were playing in Cincinnati, they wouldn't have suspended them because then they would have lost all their merch. I don't think so. But that's obviously anybody's opinion. I'm not going to sit here and try and argue with you on that. At the end of the day, the rules are the rules and they enforce them. I've got no problem with that. That being said, it can also be true that the rule is antiquated and it needs to be reanalyzed for the modern game, right? So one of the examples I had put out there was in MLB, players opt out of the home run derby. In the NBA, they're like, nope, I'm not doing the dunk contest anymore. In MLS, maybe we can get to a point where we can find that happy medium, right? So, and we're going to get into Jorge Mas's comments here in a second, but schedule congestion's the big thing, right? In the NBA, it's less about it's more about having fun in the NBA and less about the competition. In the MLB, you're not really doing a lot of heavy exertion in your body. In soccer, it's a different story, right? So, for example, maybe we get to a point where you say, okay, if we are at July and you've played over 25, 30 games already, you get a pass because you need a break, right? Or X number of minutes, or you have to decide by a certain time if you want to go or not. Just different levels of we can't keep putting people through exertion physically if they aren't physically ready to do it. If that makes sense, I hope it does. Maybe you have them skip out on the skills competition. You make a cameo in the All-Star game, 30 minutes or whatever, and just go on out. I don't know what the answer is, but there definitely should be a way to balance this out. The last part of it too is I think that you need to have a set deadline of when you are or are not going to play. Right? If you are going to give them this opt-out clause, whether they get there or not, you have to have a deadline because you can't just have Messi show up and be like, oh yeah, by the way, I'm not coming, and then take up, Alba as well, and then take up two spots that somebody else might have really, really wanted to have to play in front of their fans or to play in their first All-Star game or to be a part of it with players that are, on this DP level of whatever. You can't just allow two players to just say, I don't feel like showing up today because that's not fair to anybody else. So after this decision was made, Jorge Mas then came out and went on a little tirade about this decision to suspend them. And he made these following comments. I'm just going to break them down here because it was a 20-minute press conference that he kind of went through and fielded questions about it. But basically, first off, he uses the MLS, which we know basically makes all of his points invalid. I'm just kidding. But he emphasized that he wanted them to rest as a club decision. So it wasn't just Miami, or it wasn't just Messi and Alba saying, I don't really want to play. The club basically told them, yeah, you're going to rest. You're not going to play in this game, and we'll deal with the repercussions later. Which again tells me that maybe they thought they could just get away with it and be like, oh, well, Messi's bigger than you, which is something that he brings up later in his comments. But he claims that the rules for a one-game suspension are not a good rule because it makes players choose between an exhibition and a regular season match. So essentially saying he either would have had to play in Austin, or rather, excuse me, he would rather have to skip out on Austin and then miss FCC, or he'd have to skip out on the game against Red Bull and not play in the All-Star game, which is very much not true. There was nothing about it that said you have to miss the game before to play in the All-Star game. That's a little bit of a stretch there, I think, Mr. Moss. But we'll get into some of those comments in a second. He then calls the rule draconian, right? Which is, I think, a very crazy exaggeration for what happened here. You missed a game. And then he brings up the schedule congestion, which is a fair gripe, right? Don't get me wrong, but let's not forget that he's also part of the ownership group in MLS that voted to bring Leagues Cup in, where you're throwing an extra, couple of games into this competition where you didn't need to put it there in the first place, right? So I don't think they're in a position to complain, much like the many times that we pointed out during the US Open Cup fiasco, where schedule congestion is a monster of your own creation. You cannot cry foul when it comes back to attack you. So when you're sitting here saying, "Oh, we need Messi to take a break from the All-Star game because of schedule congestion," the schedule is congested for a lot of different reasons, but it's not because of one game in the All-Star game, right? You've got the Club World Cup, which took up a lot of time of your own time, right? You've got now a bunch of games that are backfilled because you got 3 games to make up. Fine. You've got the Champions League you were in. You've got, the Leagues Cup you're going to play in just coming up here in the next couple of weeks. But it's very, very interesting to me that it always falls back on schedule congestion. And this is something that came up with the Open Cup. It always falls back on schedule congestion only when it hurts them, never when it hurts somebody else, right? And then he really hangs up on this idea of having him play an extra game in the All-Star game. And he had to play an extra game in Austin. He played at Red Bull. He would have played at Austin. He'd have to play it at FCC. He would have played 30 minutes max, guys. Yeah, you can complain like he would have had to travel from New York to Austin, back to Cincinnati and what have you. Sure. No doubt about it. The travel is tough, but it's tough on everybody. But you can't sit here and say, "Oh, playing in the All-Star game for 30 minutes would have killed him for Cincinnati." I don't believe that. And then there was a question that came out about his comment or if this decision would impact his relationship with the league or his extension talks, which first I think is a strange way to phrase a question mere hours after the decision, right? It almost feels like it was like a softball for him to line up and give a soundbite, if you will, right? He mentions that there's a chance that this incident, which, basically Jordi Alba and Messi were so very upset that they got suspended from a game against FC Cincinnati in the middle of July, that Messi's just not going to resign a new contract because that's how much he wanted to play in the FCC game. I'm not buying that. This feels very much like a let's get the media to think that the league is going to make a bad decision, lose out on Miami or lose out on Messi in Miami for another 2 years, and everybody will hate the league and everybody will support Miami's handling of the situation and they'll feel better about it in the press. I don't at all believe that a single game suspension is going to ruin Messi's chances of coming back if he's going to come back at all because he still needs to be playing for the World Cup. So I'm not buying that one. He then goes on to say a couple of other things when asked about like, hey, why didn't you rest Messi? Because you're talking about schedule congestion. He's played 90 minutes for the past every game. And he goes, oh, when Messi's on the field, he's going to play 90 minutes. Okay, well, then you're not worried about schedule congestion then because you're playing him 90 minutes every game, right? And I'm not saying you have to rest him, but you can't complain about schedule congestion if you're not handling schedule congestion properly. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna sit here and listen to you complain about and this goes to any manager, right? Oh, the schedule is congested and we have not enough time to rest, not enough time to rest. And you got players on your bench that you can rotate in when you're up 5-1 against Red Bull and not have to run him out for another 90 minutes. Right. Again, it's all on their own creation, and this goes for a lot of MLS owners, by the way. So I'm not just focusing on them here, but there are ways to improve this, and we've talked about this a little bit where you don't have to stick with this just because we've always done it. We can make it better. And the first thing was just the scheduling of the All-Star game, right? Do we need to put it on a Wednesday between 2 games in the middle of July? Can we take a weekend right before Leagues Cup, right? We're no longer taking a month off for Leagues Cup, so Leagues Cup starts on a Tuesday, right? This year on the by the time you're watching this, it'll already be started. Why not play it on the Saturday before and then start Leagues Cup on a Wednesday? Right? It's the same thing. Everybody gets a break off and then you play, right? It's not that hard and maybe you do it that way, right? Because Jorge Mas mentioned it too, right? 48 hours after the All-Star game, there were 6 games being played in MLS. So to say that you're looking out for player safety and you're worried about the overload, but then to do something like that, I'm not sure he doesn't have a fair point there. Now, how many players in the All-Star game were negatively impacted by the 6 games being played directly after? I don't know. And what does that 30-minute appearance or 45-minute appearance do for the readiness of those games? I don't know, right? But I'm sure you can slide that in as being an issue. But at the end of the day, for me, I do think that there needs to be some sort of clause or game limit that can allow you to opt out, right? Jorge Mas's favorite, biggest point was at the end of the day, we need to prioritize the league over exhibitions, and I agree. I don't disagree with him there, but I do also agree that the All-Star game has a place in this league. And it has a place in sports culture, right? If you think back to it, and this was a conversation we had on Twitter with a couple of fans who made a very, very good point that the All-Star game is not for the adults who have been watching this league for 10 years. The All-Star game is for the kids, 7, 8, 9, 10, to see their favorite players and the best players in the league ball out and have a great time, but also to see, oh man, this guy's actually really good. I should keep an eye on him and know the league better, right? When you were a kid, the All-Star game and the Home Run Derby were must-watch events in the MLB, right? I mean, I remember getting home from soccer training and sitting down with my dinner and watching the Home Run Derby because it was electric. The dunk contest and the three-point shot, you have to be there, right? It is so much fun. It's so energetic and it's different. It's not just game after game after game. The skills challenge can be that in the MLS All-Star game, and I think it could be really fun. Again, I've made it clear it's not really for me, but again, I'm 28. I'm not the desired audience for an All-Star game. But I do think it has a place in this league. They just have to find the balance for it. So that's my take on the All-Star game. Please let me know what you think, and we'll get Connor's thought as well. But I want to finish up on the Messi talk here with this idea of Messi's role in MLS and being an ambassador, because there's this growing commentary around the league that, what has Messi actually done for MLS? He doesn't do any press conferences. He doesn't do any adverts or anything like that. He just does one beer commercial and goes on. I could not care less if Lionel Messi is doing a monthly advertisement or using the general, oh yeah, MLS is a great league clip. Don't care. This is not the type of player who wins eyeballs to the league with press conferences and sound bites. That was Zlatan Ibrahimovic, who was a great player in his own right, but he drew more eyes to the league via his personality than he did his game, right? People watch because, oh, look at Zlatan saying, Carlos Vela is a sheep and he's a lion, or MLS is bad pay to play. All these sound bites got people to talk about MLS. People talk about MLS with Messi because of what he's doing and how he's playing. I don't think you need him in front of a camera every 24 seconds to make some sort of statement to get people to look here. However, the question is, has Messi done anything in MLS in terms of its brand and its global recognition? And I think undoubtedly the answer is yes. With the Apple TV deal and the growing eyes from the product, with the Apple TV deal and the growing eyes on the league product, you got more people involved, knowing about the league, as Inter Miami as a whole, people talking about MLS. Could it have been more? Maybe, right? Would it have been more with press conferences and commercials? I don't think so. I don't think anybody's turning on a TV, especially with MLS behind Apple TV, and saying, "Oh, Messi came and said MLS is a tough league, and maybe I should watch it because he says that." I don't think that's going to change the game because that's not who Messi was. Messi never got people to look because he was making comments about where he was or who he was playing against. He did it because he's the best player in the world. I've had this feeling for a while now that this idea that we're competing with or going to compete with European leagues either now or in 10 years is just crazy. And it's not because we aren't good enough or we're not talented enough or we're not developing players or we're not marketed well enough or we're not buying enough players. None of that matters. To me, it's because of culture and history that takes generations to change. You have to remember the Club World Cup where we saw Brazilian teams absolutely running through anybody who was in their path. And all you saw were excuses, right? Oh, well, it's preseason for the Europeans and they didn't even care and blah, 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 right? There is a whole generation of American soccer fans who have been conditioned to believe that Europe is the best and that no one will ever dethrone the king in the game of soccer. Now, whether that's true or not, I'm not gonna sit here and try and defend it. I do believe that they are the pole bearer. But to say that there's nobody who can ever touch them, I think is a stretch. again, I'm not talking only the Premier League, which is instantly where everybody goes to when we talk about European soccer because that's all they ever watch, and that's okay. But the idea that, MLS isn't on the same level as the lower parts of the Dutch league or the lower parts of the Belgian league, which I've seen games played there and absolutely on par with some of our top teams, right? It's all a big, big pool of information, and there are 346 different metrics you can use to say that one league's better than the other, and this metric and that metrics. But what you're not going to get, no matter how many different ways you look at it, is an entire generation of Americans who grew up in a European soccer first household trying to switch over to another club in America just because um, it's a local team, or Messi said it was a good game that they played against, or you went to the game to watch Messi and you saw them play. You're not getting an entire generation of those people to change. Are you going to get handfuls of people? Absolutely, and that was the whole point. But just because Messi stands up in front of a mic and says, "Yeah, Columbus Crew was a good game. They were really tough, and they were the best team we played this year," that doesn't instantly take all the Euro snobs and the anti-MLS crowd and be like, "Oh, Messi said what about Columbus? I'm going to go follow them now." It doesn't work that way. You have to be involved and really, really built into it. Like we've said before, it's not getting 100% of the people who watch Messi to be MLS fans. We've seen those people who come into the comments of MLS tweets and saying, "Oh yeah, we're only here to watch Messi. Once he leaves, we don't care about you. Nobody cares about your league and you're garbage and blah 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 blah." Right? And I'm very, very certain that an extra Messi interview every month is not going to make a difference because and I don't think that his lack of interview of availability or lack of time in front of the press is making him any less of an ambassador, like some people are saying. And the reason I say that is because while I would love for him to come out and make statements about how the league is strong and competitive and growing every year, like every other big name star has, the only and like Ronaldo has said about the Saudi league, by the way, stuff like that. If he came out and said stuff like that, the only thing you're seeing in the comments is stuff that we've said about Ronaldo, right? Oh, he's only getting paid to say that, and this is a retirement league or a money washing league, and you're gonna get the Messi fans just saying this retirement burger league is trash. Messi needs to leave ASAP, and it doesn't matter what MLS does. And Messi standing in front of a microphone is not going to change any of that on any impactful scale. You might get a few people who are like, okay, well, maybe he said that. Now I'm actually going to watch it. But for the most part, you don't have those Messi fans are not going to change. But what you're trying to do is say, okay, well, I'm going to take my kid to this game, Columbus versus Miami, and have him watch the game and say, oh, this was really fun. I want to come back. Or my daughter, or my cousin, or this or that, or whatever it may be. But just having Messi come out and say MLS is good is not going to change the opinion of an entire anti-MLS and Eurosnob fan base. And I'll leave it at that, but you can let me know. I'm sure that'll make some rounds, but that's my thoughts, and I've had that thought for a while. And like I said, for me, it's you have to just keep bringing people to the game, let them enjoy the atmosphere, and buy into the team, get them to watch a game a month, a game every 2 weeks until they're watching it every single week and saying, yeah, this is something I want to watch every week. That's where I'm at.